have made it to the 5th webinar in this I Am Experience Presents webinar series. Thank you for joining us. We have been lucky to be joined by educators all over the country and also internationally. Let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. You are coming in from everywhere: Boston, Wisconsin, Chicago, Michigan City, Central Arkansas, Oakland representing. I love it. All right. Iowa, of course, New Hampshire, Kentucky, Albany. Look at you all. Thank you for joining us. We are so excited you are here. My name is Dion Aminata, Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at Illustrative Mathematics and one of the lead authors of the IMK5 math curriculum. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. This event has been made accessible through live American Sign Language and live captioning. And to gain access to captions, click on Show Captions on your Zoom screen menu and click Show Subtitles. During this discussion, feel free to use the chat feature to make comments and ask questions directly of our panelists, and use the Q&A feature to ask questions about partners, products, or professional learning. If you are a Twitter user, tag @IllustrateMath and use the hashtags IMXWebinar and Learn with IM to share your enthusiasm. Okay. So with so many of you getting ready to go back to school, and many of you are already back in school, we wanted to bring you a topic that is on most educators' minds when thinking about the school year ahead: pacing. When we think about the variety of brilliant minds in each and every classroom and the need for teachers to ensure that each student gets access to grade level instruction, pacing becomes a point of concern. You want to know how to attend to the needs of all students in the class with regards to supporting students with unfinished instruction, supporting multilingual learners, adding scaffolds to support cultural relevance and making math meaningful. You want to know how to do all of these things, not only maintain pacing, but maintain the rigor in the standards. Well, I couldn't think of a better panel of experts to talk about this than the one we have for you today. We have the very people behind the lessons in the curriculum and the professional learning content, and you'll get a chance to hear directly from illustrative mathematics subject matter experts, curriculum writers, and the designers behind IM's professional learning offerings. They not only designed our materials, but they also have experience as school leaders, coaches, and implementers of the IM K-12 math curriculum. So you definitely came to the right webinar. So let's get into it. We're gonna actually start by doing some math together. Y'all ready? Which one doesn't belong? Take a moment to think. And when you're ready, drop your which one doesn't belong in the chat. Okay, I see C's and B's. I see just one lonely A so far. Let's see. I don't see any D's yet. What's going on with this? A couple more A's and C's. I see a D now. Look at us. And so when you have which one doesn't belong, can you also tell us why it doesn't belong? So someone said A because it's the only one that's decreasing. All right. B because the lines are not parallel. Okay. Someone said A, B, C, and D with a little bit of laughing. I like that, Blair. Thank you. Let's see. They all don't belong in different ways. Okay, A, the only negative slope, let's see. B, because it will intersect, so a different way to say that. D is the only one that has a line going through the origin. Okay, awesome. And Let's see, D is the steepest slope. All right. Let's see. Very good. And so what I am able to do with a routine like this is get a sense of the vocabulary that's popping up. So I'm listening and learning to all of the brilliance that's happening in the chat. And I know that you know about parallel lines. I know that you know about decreasing slopes and steep slopes, and the origin came up, right? And so there are all these vocabulary terms that are coming up, and it becomes fun for students because there's a reason why each one doesn't belong. And because we're talking about the topic of pacing, routine like these are only meant to take no more than 10 minutes of class time. I know some of us are chuckling right now, but they allow students to share their brilliance, and our audience is definitely showing that right now, showing their brilliance right now. But they also allow teachers to formatively take note of the brilliance in the room. So I get a chance as the person who is facilitating this, I get a chance to see what students already know and what they're bringing to the classroom. With routines like which one doesn't belong, all students have the opportunity to build confidence in their reasoning skills. In this case, there's a reason why each example doesn't belong, which opens up the discourse to every student in the classroom and invites them to think and share their reasoning. This instructional practice is directly aligned with IAM's beliefs about teaching and learning. IAM's beliefs start with teachers being curious about and trusting student thinking to drive learning. And it ends with students knowing, using, and enjoying mathematics. And we have lots to talk about. So we're going to bring in our panel. I'm going to introduce each one of them, starting with Sarah Caban. Sarah Caban is one of the lead authors of the grade 5 curriculum for Illustrative Mathematics, K5 Math, and she is currently a senior specialist of professional learning at Illustrative Mathematics. Sarah collaborates within and across teams to develop curriculum and professional learning experiences that position teachers and students as authors of important mathematical ideas. Welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Dion. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. Catherine Castillo has spent her career working with Title I schools as a classroom teacher, instructional numeracy coach, math recovery intervention specialist, and district numeracy coordinator, and now serves as a mathematics client specialist at IAM. Catherine is currently working on her doctoral degree with a research focus on teacher actions that support mathematical discourse. Welcome, Catherine.
Welcome, everyone. Glad to be here.
I told y'all we have an amazing panel. So let's keep going. Mike Henderson. Mike Henderson collaborated with lead writers of grade 2 and grade 4 materials and is currently working on revisions for the next version of IAM K5 Math. So we need your feedback because Mike is on the job. He enjoys imagining how students will experience the materials and is looking forward to collaborating with students and their teachers to continue to improve the quality of their math experiences. Welcome, Mike.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, and we have Sherelle McKnight. Sherelle has had a diverse range of experiences with illustrative mathematics. She first engaged with the program as a classroom teacher, then as a district curriculum and instruction specialist. She later helped others with the curriculum as an IAM certified facilitator. And now she is serving as the K5 director of content development. Sherelle is passionate about supporting students and teachers. She eagerly anticipates upcoming projects at IAM that will continue to enhance the learning experience for all. Welcome, Sherelle.
Hey, welcome party people. Glad to be here.
We are glad to have you. All right, let's get the party let's continue inviting people to the party. We have Courtney Ortega. She is a national board certified teacher and currently serves as a secondary math coordinator for Oakland Unified School District in California. She has developed professional learning systems grounded in lesson study, the true math framework, and site-based content coaching. She believes in nurturing collaborative structures that empower teams of teachers to engage in student-centered inquiry. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Awesome. And last but definitely not least, we have Jennifer Wilson. And Jennifer enjoys learning alongside the Illustrative Mathematics community as the director of 612 Professional Learning Design. She is a national board certified teacher, and she taught and learned mathematics with students and teachers in Mississippi for 25 years. She thinks a lot about how we might slow down and savor learning math through curiosity, collaboration, and connections. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Glad to be here with everyone learning.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I told you all, I brought my friends today. We are going to have an amazing discussion about pacing and rigor, right from the people who are behind the scenes, helping to craft these experiences for students. And so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so we can see everyone's lovely face. We have a full party today. All right. Oops. Okay. And we're gonna get started with our first question. All right, so the question is, why is pacing such a huge issue? And how have you, and how are you addressing these issues in your position at IM and or your career? Take it away.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. So why is pacing such an issue? Because kids say really interesting things when we give them great tasks. So I, like many of you, were probably that educator that could spend 45 minutes on a number talk because it's really interesting what kids are saying. But when I worked as a district coordinator for a large district and we implemented IM, one of the things that we were really paying attention to was pacing because it was a struggle for our teachers, like it probably is for many of you. So one of the things we did was we created regular collaborative opportunities for our teachers to come together and talk about what was working and what we needed to kind of think through. Through that, we learned from a lot of our teachers that they already had solutions to some of those problems. They were timing their lessons. Like me, who took 45 minutes on a number talk, we knew we didn't have time for that. So they started saying, all right, I set a timer for myself. They talked about how they were purposely planning their units so that they could really think about, if I need to crunch some lessons, how do I do that based on the goals of the unit? And then we also looked at and revised some of our current practices that just weren't equitable. So we took out additional review days before tests because we didn't need it for IM. And we committed to not stopping instruction of grade level mathematics to fill gaps. So I'm interested to hear what other people on the team have to say.
I'm thinking, so pacing is such a huge issue. Generally, we have more math than we have moments slated for math, right? So my experience in the K-5 space, reading and writing are going to take priority. Arithmetic gets what's left, and science and social studies, they don't even enter the chat, right? They're just fit it in when you can. And so for us, I think it's important to mention that even before we get into the curriculum, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball and just kind of schedule, right? So it's tough to start math class at 12:50 on paper when you're also picking up your students from lunch at 12:50, right? So it's the idea of how are we going to make this work with the time, the actual time, not the time on paper, but the actual time that we have to get these things done in the schoolhouse. So a thing that we try to keep in mind and just talking with and working with teachers and students is, what does this look like in the schoolhouse? What does this lesson look like when your math block is continuous? What does it look like when your math block is interrupted by specials and now you've got kids who've come back from PE and they are excited. And you need to get them back on track for the math because, again, on paper, this is the time that I have. So I think in theory, we want to think about how does this lesson look in the schoolhouse and not just how does it look on paper? What is going to actually happen in the students, in the classroom for students and teachers to be able to pull this lesson, this unit, this curriculum, this entire year? How are we going to pull this off with the time that we have? So that's a big thing in thinking about, does it look good? Is it unrealistic, unreasonable, or can we actually get this done?
So in my work as a secondary math coordinator in a large urban school district, similar to Catherine, just really thinking about how am I partnering with our teachers, our school leaders, the people who are on the ground with our students each and every day. Because for us, pacing is such a huge issue because access to grade level work is an equity issue. So when we first implemented IM, the two biggest questions were, how do I finish all the units? Say, just like Sherelle said, there's so much math to do in such little time. So how do we get through all the units? And then the second question was, okay, but then how do I finish a lesson in a day? Right. So there are all these questions of like, I'm making sense of a new curriculum and making sense of potentially a new pedagogy. How do I make that all fit? So I'm lucky that I get to sit in a position where I get to partner with our school leaders, our teachers, and our students to really think about how does this look in the classroom. So we do a lot of math together. So I get to, support and nurture a lot of systems where we're sitting together, we're doing math as a group of principals. I was actually just in a meeting with a group of principals this morning, and we were doing math together and looking at some classroom video footage from a math classroom to think about, okay, how can we support our students here? How are we supporting teachers to be in that collaborative space with each other, to learn from each other, share what they already know, so that we're unpacking units together, so we know how our units are connecting within a course, across courses, seeing that vertical articulation. And how do we build that ongoing professional learning for teachers? So it's not just a one and done. It's not just a week-long Standards Institute in the summer, but this is something that we're coming together every month, a couple times a month, to come together, to do that math together, to make sense, look at student work and think about, okay, how are we helping students build these connections over time so that we're taking away that pressure from thinking about, okay, every day I need to get to this moment. And if I don't get there, I got to try again tomorrow and redo that lesson. So those are just a few things that really come to mind as we're thinking about supporting pacing here in Oakland.
Thank you for that. I hope y'all are taking notes because they are dropping some gems. Jennifer, you want to take the question next?
Absolutely. So pacing is an issue because teaching is complex, right? Trusting a curriculum is scary, and unit planning takes time that we often have to devote to other priorities. In my role as a professional learning designer, we try to work on these challenges realistically and practically. Like Catherine said, one challenge is the timing for the lesson. It's easy to spend too much time on activities, the warm-ups in particular, because the activities create great conversations that are sometimes hard to stop. An antidote to that is using a timer to pay attention to the amount of time spent on the activity. Then during the activity synthesis, rather than hearing out loud from every student, use the think, pair, share structure to ensure that all students are getting to share their thinking with a partner, and then select a few students to share their thinking with the whole class by considering which students need to be heard and seen as authors of important mathematical ideas today, so that eventually, over time, in the week, all students are contributing to the mathematical community. Think, pair, share is so simple. It feels so simple, but it is such a high leverage structure and routine for getting students to talk so that they're getting their ideas out there and their focus can then be on the content and not how they're trying to share their thinking with others.
Thank you so much. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, I think pacing is such an issue because, as Sherelle touched on, like time is such an issue in our schools. I think within a school year, there's so many different competing demands on the time for students, for teachers, for administrators. And it tends to pull people in lots of different directions that don't always feel super connected. I think adding on to that, like the time demands of learning and implementing a new curriculum, like from just the time it takes to digest new materials to the time it takes to get comfortable with new routines and ways of teaching, to the normal time it takes to get to know your students and develop that culture where all students feel comfortable sharing their ideas in the classroom. I think one of the things we do on the writing team to help with this is we really lean into the idea that mathematics is coherent, that mathematical concepts and skills are all connected to each other in a way that should make sense. I think we spend a lot thinking about how do we create a student experience where students don't see math as just a laundry list of disconnected skills that they have to master, or skills that they have to master before they can even start to master other skills, but they see that new math is connected to what they already know about not just math, but their own lived experience. And that they see that unfinished learning is normal. Like everyone has unfinished learning, like where students are going to be able to still learn math and finish some of their learning in a natural, normal progression because math is connected and it makes sense.
Yes, yes, yes. And Sarah, bring it home for us. How should we be thinking about this?
I agree with everything everyone said. It all makes sense. The only sort of piece I would add, I think, that was a big aha for me in the classroom as a teacher and also working with teachers as a coach. And it has to do with, given what Mike just said about the design of the curriculum and coherence being really embedded in the stories of the math story across lessons and sections and units. Every student doesn't have to complete every problem in every lesson to get to understand important mathematical ideas. It's possible for students to move forward and for understanding to develop across lessons. And I think that I know as a teacher, I really felt like I wanted to do well. I wanted everybody to do all the work that was given to them. And what I know now is it's possible to make sense of important mathematical ideas across lessons. And just because I don't finish every problem doesn't mean that I didn't learn anything and that I don't have the knowledge I need to move forward. Keep moving forward and trust that students are making sense, like Mike said.
Thank you all so much. I mean, I'm just grateful that you all are in the positions that you are with the passion that you're speaking to this issue. Just thank you for being here and thank you for offering your expertise to our audience today. I have another question for you. I have several, but here's the next one. How should we be thinking about rigor when it comes to math instruction? And then to add to that, how can we be sure to maintain the rigor of the lesson when making adaptations to the curriculum to meet the needs of all students? And so I think I'm going to go to Mike first for this one. How should we be thinking about rigor?
Yeah, I think the big thing about rigor is making sure we're on the same page of what we mean by rigorous instruction or rigorous mathematics instruction. I think traditionally we often think of rigor as like whether something is hard or easy or complex, or more or less complex for kids. But when we think about rigor in mathematics, we think about how are students given access to develop deep understanding of mathematical concepts. And when we're designing our curriculum, we try to make sure we're balancing three aspects of rigor, that being conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and application. And over the course of a grade level or course, or over the course of a unit or even a lesson, we try to make sure we're balancing those three aspects and treating them with equal intensity. Traditionally, and particularly in US schools, like there's only been one of those aspects that's been a focus, and that's been procedural skill and fluency. So I think the important thing to ask when you're considering adaptations, which you should be considering adaptations based on your students' needs, the big thing to consider is what is the mathematical concepts in this unit or in this lesson, and what aspects of rigor are designed, and what aspects of rigor are important to developing that mathematical concept. And then after you make changes or discuss changes of thinking, did I lower the aspect of rigor or did I maintain it? Because if we're lowering or changing the aspect of rigor, we may actually be changing whether or not students are given access to grade level mathematics. I think the other thing for administrators to think about, especially in the early years of adopting IM and a problem-based approach from what might be a traditional like I do, we do, you do approach, is like, what are the structures that you have in place that you need to get rid of to make sure teachers are able to maintain the aspects of rigor that are important for developing that deep understanding. So that might be really evaluating how you have pushed certain approaches that might not be in line with the problem-based approach. That might be looking at how you're doing your assessments and how you're talking about assessments, whether those are state level or district level, and whether they're aligned to the rigor of the mathematics we expect for students, and how we might be discussing those assessment results in ways that incentivize proceduralizing instruction.
Thank you for bringing up the mathematical Common Core definition of rigor. I think that's really important. The standards themselves are aligned to that balance of the three aspects of rigor. And if we're teaching to the standards, I'm seeing Kit Golan in the comments saying, yeah, if we don't, if we're teaching grade level math, we're teaching to the standards. If we're denying, if we're over proceduralizing pieces, then we're not providing equitable instruction for all. So thank you all for lifting those points in the chat, and Mike. Jennifer, would you like to add to this discussion?
Absolutely. Yeah, so like Mike said, IM K-12 math has taken rigor into account in our overarching design structure and the way that our authors have written our curriculum. Each unit begins with an introductory lesson that's an invitation to the mathematics, followed by a deep study of concepts and procedures. That goes through a series of instructional lessons where students are building procedural fluency from conceptual understanding. And then we round out the unit with an opportunity for students to apply the math that they've learned through the culminating lesson. This design structure happens on the course level, it happens on the unit level, the lesson level, and even on a very small scale at the activity level. Let's think about it at the lesson level for a moment. Each lesson begins with an invitation to the mathematics, follows with a deep study of targeted concepts and procedures, and ends with an opportunity for teachers and students to partner together to synthesize and apply their learning. So my advice for adaptations is to keep that overarching design structure in mind. Some people are asking in the chat about what happens when you don't finish a lesson one day, or what happens when you look at a unit and it has 20 lessons, but you only have 15 days for that unit. So if that happens when you're selecting the lessons out of the 20, you're going to select 15 out of 20. Ensure that that overarching design structure is still there. Be sure that you're including at least one of those invitation introductory lessons from the beginning of the unit. Don't go straight into the deep study. Start with that invitation to the mathematics. Then after the deep study lessons, be sure that students have a chance to apply their learning. Several of you have also asked about a block schedule. So if you're on a block schedule and you're trying to figure out how to combine 2 lessons into one block, ensure the design structure is still evident in the activities that you select. Start with a warm-up, then move to deep study, and then synthesis. Same kind of thing if you're on a shortened schedule and you can't get to all the activities in the lesson, ensure the design is still evident in the activities that you select. Invitation, deep study, and synthesis. It's so easy to skip the synthesis, but don't do that. Closure for a lesson shouldn't just be students packing up their backpacks. It needs to be a cognitive process. At the end of a learning episode, students need the opportunity to think about what they've learned and how it's connected to what they already know. I think that maybe somebody from the team is going to put into the chat a link to the Black scheduling guidance for grades 6 through 12, and that can help in your planning.
Yeah, I think we put it in there when you introduced yourself, but we can add it back in because I do think it addresses a lot of the questions that were coming in the chat as well. So thank you for lifting that and reminding us of the coherent design structure. What we, if we're adapting, we want to maintain this flow. And so thank you for lifting that. Who wants to talk next?
I would just add to that, I love Jennifer's explanation of using the design structure as a filter. And I just would add a specific example of that. You can do that at the lesson level. I've worked with teachers who have 45 minutes, elementary teachers, for their math block, and our lessons are written for 60. And if you think about using that design structure as a filter for shortening lessons, we did it together with a grade 5 unit 2 lesson 1. Which is an invitational lesson. And so we knew we needed to have a lot of invitation in that lesson. When we looked at the lesson, we saw that the warm-up was very invitation. It invited students to make sense of the context of sandwiches, which is a really relevant context in the section when students are thinking of division as thinking of fractions as division. We saw that the synthesis of the warm-up asked students to share what they knew about sharing food and sandwiches. And we decided to start with that and then see what the students brought to the lesson. We had the warm up, which one doesn't belong, in our back pocket. And we knew we could project it and ask students to tell us about the images and one of which was a sandwich. But we also knew that if students brought enough to the conversation, that we could move into the activity feeling like everyone was invited and could make sense of the problems in activity 1 that we did. And that worked. So using that design structure helped us see exactly in the lesson where we might cut or have in our back pocket if we need it, but know that if we didn't need it, we could move through the lesson and use less time. So I think that's a pretty specific way that you could use Jennifer's recommendation that I think works. And you're still maintaining the integrity of the curriculum. And students are still making sense of, and they're still getting access to rigorous grade level mathematics.
I'd add that in meeting the needs of the students, their needs are to have access to grade level mathematics, right? And so if I want to meet that need, then I need to think about the students that I have that show up every day in front of me. And that can be different, my A class to my B class, where the choices that I make are going to be dependent upon the students that I have. But they have to have that opportunity to have those needs met with grade level mathematics. I give my mom a hard time. When I was learning to drive, she said I couldn't go somewhere because it was raining. And she said, well, you don't know how to drive in the rain. And my response was, well, when would I learn to drive in the rain if I don't drive in the rain? And so if we don't give students a chance to drive in the rain, when are they going to get that opportunity if we're taking the rigor away and they're not having that chance? The big thing is just to stay curious, because sometimes I think we panic a little bit. And so the degree of, correction should match the degree of the error. Sometimes we want to throw everything out and say, you know what, we're going back to square one. But like, I think Mike or someone, we all will say these things over and over. Students have a lot of information. They know a lot of things. So how do we connect what they already know to the things that they're learning? How do we help them to see, hey, this is the thing you know a little bit about already. And oh my goodness, look how it's connected to this brand new thing you're going to learn in this grade level. So we maintain that rigor by staying curious and giving students a chance to drive in the rain.
I should unmute. Thank you so much for that. I'm practical ways to address the issue or the concerns around rigor. So thank you to each one of you who shared those. We also dropped our adaptation pack resource in the chat for you, so you can have access to that. We have that for each grade band, so you can take a look and see how that works. And if anyone wants to lift what that's about, then go for it. I am going to stop sharing my screen so I can get to the next question. All right, and I'm going to mute. So did anyone want to lift the adaptation packs and how that could be used, or if anyone has used those?
Talk a little bit about that, Dion, because I have regular conversations with districts who are having the same question, right? Excuse me. So one of the things that I love about the adaptation packs and what I think really speaks to people who are currently in the classroom is that we've had a lot of questions in the chat about that comment I made regarding not stopping instruction and intervening. And so this kind of speaks to that. Our adaptation packs were purposefully designed by our curriculum team to really not have us stopping to intervene, but providing that just-in-time support instead of just-in-case support for accessing grade level content. So what you're going to see is in those first few units, you're going to have some additional materials to connect that learning that Sherelle was just talking about that students already have. So those adaptation packs, they're available on our hub. They're awesome. And I would just like to add to that we also have section planning guides. And when Sarah was mentioning that there are some classrooms that have 45 minutes of instruction, it's real, right? Some of us have 45 minutes of instruction. Those section planning guides can really help because we've already kind of taken some of the guesswork out of that about like, what are the specific activities in this section that if I just don't have time for all of them, that I can focus on. So I think those two things, if you haven't visited our resource hub, you're gonna love it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I just didn't want to drop it in the chat and we didn't have a clear explanation and leave it to Catherine to give that clear explanation. Thank you so much. Moving on to question 3. Something we often hear is that our curriculum is too rigorous for students who have unfinished instruction. Maybe they missed certain learning, certain mathematical concepts. Maybe there's some absenteeism, some improper pacing from the previous year. What curricular adaptations can be made to support those students with engaging in rigorous tasks in a way that doesn't result in teachers falling behind in pacing?
All right, so I would first, like Mike said earlier, I'd argue every student has unfinished learning. I have unfinished learning. I don't think there's a person on the webinar who does not have unfinished learning, right? Somebody in this webinar, somebody in your chair, in fact, has unfinished learning. So again, if we are staying curious, because that unfinished learning doesn't mean I can't get to this next thing. It means I, as a teacher, have to have just really great content knowledge so that I can see where my students can't see a thing that they do, a thing that they know that has a connection, because to them it might not be obvious, but me as the subject matter expert, I have to be able to say, ooh, all I need is this. If you give me this little piece, baby, I got you, we can get there. A thing that I do have a little bit of trouble kind of wrapping my head around is sometimes people say it's too rigorous. And then they show me their goals, and their goals were that 85% of their students will pass. And I'm like, well, can you point to the ones who aren't going to? Because you've already decided that 15% of these students aren't going to pass. If you already have that thought in mind, you haven't stayed curious, you're not keeping the idea that students can, you have to see them as capable and able learners. And so I would challenge some of us in our mindsets to say, well, I'm going to have 100% of my students. Because if not, then I challenge you to handpick out the students, tell their mom, hey, your baby is actually not going to pass this year, because I've said 15% of them aren't going to. So keeping your expectations high, right? Keeping the wishes and the wants and desires you have for students, even if they don't see themselves as mathers, they don't see themselves as typically having success in math. that'll help me in thinking about the adaptations I can make. That'll help me in thinking about how I connect to this student. Because when we wrote the curriculum, I wasn't here for that part. I'll say we though, because we're a collective we are thinking nationally. We know that you're going to have to make decisions, right? We have 180 days of school, again, on paper, but I don't have 180 days of actual teaching. So as you're making those decisions, you knowing your students, you knowing that community that you've built, that'll help you in thinking, okay, well, where are my students? What do they have? Again, I always want to connect, what do they have to that thing that they're trying to get to? So I think a big part of thinking about it as being too rigorous is the mindset of, am I staying curious? Am I trusting my students? Do I trust myself to be able to find the connections and see where, hey, you know what, they have this thing. It's a little bit shaky, but you know what, because I'm the professional and I've got the student loans to prove it, then I can be the one to help them to make this next connection.
Cheryl, I love everything that you just said. Yeah, and it looks like there's a lot of love in the chat box too. Yeah, a lot of that is resonating. And I think what you said, just that hits so real. Like I think back to our first year of implementing 6-8 math, because we first adopted middle school IM math in 2018. And I remember one of our 6th grade teachers, she said to me at the end of the school year, she's like, I wish I just trusted my kids and I trusted the curriculum and I just kept going. Particularly when we think about Unit 1, right? Like I can't even tell you how many teachers have come to me saying, Unit 1, it's so big, it's so important, and I'm still in it. And I'm like, it's November, we got to move on, right? You know, and so I think that comes back to some of the things that are coming up. It's like, okay, so how can we leverage all of those tools and resources that are available to us? How can we leverage each other as collaborative partners in making sense of where the math is going, right? Like so many people on this panel have shared, the curriculum is so thoughtfully crafted for us. We just need to uncover what's already there. So some tools and resources that have really supported our middle school and high school teachers as they are making sense of IM and making it come to life in their classrooms is that check your readiness, right? So as we're thinking about that pre-unit diagnostic, that just-in-time support, how are we making sense of what, sorry, this is real life. I'm at a school in a classroom, so I apologize if there's voices behind me. Yeah, so we think about, like, how do we leverage that check your readiness pre-unit diagnostic assessment to really to uncover what do kids already know? How can I leverage what kids already can do and what they already know and build those connections into this unit so that I'm not thinking about a pre-unit or a like little mini lesson series that I need to build. I can think about, okay, how along the way can I build in that time? Like a lot of you have named in the chat box. When we do that, we run out of time, right? That's when pacing becomes an issue. When it's like, oh, but like, you know, maybe students didn't get a chance to work with tape diagrams last year. So, you know, I need to make sure we're doing that this year. So as we're making sense of like, where do we need to squeeze so that we can stretch in other places? This is where we've really leveraged those adaptation packs in our district. So we brought a team of teachers together to unpack those adaptation packs, look at the curriculum side by side, look at our district assessment calendar, and build a realistic scope and sequence so that teachers felt like, okay, for our students, based on our data, what we know about our context, these are the units we really need to prioritize and where we know we're going to have a lot of anticipated unfinished learning. So we're planning for that ahead of time, right? It doesn't need to be a surprise. We already know where those moments are going to be. So we make a plan for that in our scope and sequence for the year. And that really just helps us make sense of what are those big ideas so that when we are teaching our lessons, as we're thinking about our student experience across the week, again, we're focusing on what's most critical. There's so many things to work on. There's so much math to do, but what are the things we're really going to focus on this week? What are those things that I'm really going to look and listen for to know that students are on their path to understanding? And that helps us avoid under teaching, right? Because we know what's going to come up. Like we know in 5 lessons, we're going to need to know how to use that double number line and interpret it. So I'm going to make sure I don't skip that in this lesson in a temptation to go faster. And I'm also going to avoid over teaching because I know I don't have to in 6th grade unit 1 do all the things around 3-dimensional figures because we're going to get another chance in unit 4 later to keep going with that work. So there's just a couple of specific tools that have been super, super helpful as we are planning together and making sense of both the big picture and the day-to-day experience.
Going to add a thing because I control my mic, no one else does. So also the idea, so keeping in mind that it's new for teachers, right? When we enter this problem-based world, and it's new for students. Students have school figured out. They know if I sit here long enough, you will move on because you have to. And so even the idea of this is new for them and giving them grace to wrestle with and have a chance to deal with this new thing. Sometimes it's not even the idea of this is a difficult thing or I'm really struggling. It's just presented in a way that's really different from the last curriculum that I used. My teachers wanted me to speak out a lot more than the last curriculum that I used. And so some of it is, yes, it's coherent, but guess what? If I am in 5th grade and we have just adopted, well, I don't get to see all of that coherence because it's just being placed on me, right? Those kindergarten students, they're going to matriculate through and it'll be a little easier for them. So some of the adaptations are not even necessarily, I need to think about adaptation in terms of content. It might be just getting students familiar with, okay, these are the representations that are going to be used in this particular curriculum. And so maybe I didn't have a lot of experience with double number lines. I was doing it a different way. But now that my students see that this is going to be the way that it's done, okay, well, I just had to kind of wrap my head around that. So even giving grace and space for students to wrestle with the things that are new to them. Because, you know, I've been a part of textbook adoptions, and I jokingly tell my last district I left because we didn't adopt IM. I will talk offline about why I left, kidding. But seriously, it's the idea of making sure that students feel comfortable, because even if they're part of, you know, the textbook adoption, that they had a survey or was out at the board office and parents had input, it was forced on them. They were voluntold. So we've been voluntold as teachers, and we get to gripe and gripe. And then for students, it's the same. And so just trusting that if they can have a chance and get some more experience with this curriculum, I might see that I don't even have to make the adaptations that I thought I had to make. I just had to give them a chance to get comfortable with this new thing, the same way that we want to give our teachers and coaches a chance to get comfortable with this new thing.
Can I piggyback on that for just a second? So a couple of things that just came up, I think are like really important, that we also have to pay attention to, like what Mike was saying earlier, like in combination with what Cheryl was just talking about, like our assessment practices, are we just basing what we believe about kids on these big, large scale assessments? Or are we watching kids and talking to kids and noticing what they're doing with that mindset of they're coming to us with lots of great information and experiences? So I think that's a really important thing to think about too. How can we use formative assessment more than we currently are to really constantly just know if somebody walks in my classroom, I can tell them if Jamal knows X, Y, and Z because I've been watching him this entire time. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind too, that a lot of this work is going to come down to like changing some of our practices as teachers, because it's a lot different to facilitate a lesson that's problem-based.
And that actually gets us into our last question, which is what advice would you give to district schools or educators who are thinking about the year ahead and wanting to prevent falling behind in pacing? Anyone want to start? I think Sarah, you want to start with this?
Sure. I think that my biggest piece of advice would be to come up with a plan together. You obviously we can anticipate what our challenges are. We just named them all. How long do we have for block? It's not. How long do we have for math? It's not 60 minutes. Okay, well, what's our plan? There are lots of ways to navigate these challenges, and then work collaboratively. Don't do it by yourself. I have seen some amazing group collaborations happening in schools in the interest of supporting students who might have what folks call unfinished learning. I've seen students who work with emerging bilingual students, special education teachers, education technicians, do warm-ups with some students before the math class. The same warm-up, because our warm-ups were designed to be done more than once. And those students do the warm-up and they try it on and they feel more comfortable speaking about it and sharing their ideas. And then they go into their math class and they're rock stars. And that's all from collaboration. I've seen schools change their schedules around. So they do 4 math classes a week. And on the 5th day, they do centers. And the teachers collaborate because our centers are all stages cross grade levels. And they have this whole center day on Friday. So don't do it alone. Work with your colleagues, work with your administrators, support as much as you can with being creative and being collaborative. And also it's a national curriculum, it's a curriculum being used all over the nation. All the stuff happening in the chat right now is amazing. The amount of teachers in the chat who are helping each other. Y'all don't need us. I mean, I think we did a good job and we're here for you, but y'all have each other now. So lean into that. For sure. And that would be my advice. Reach out. There are solutions for navigating these challenges, and we're all in it together, and we can do it. People are doing it. So I've got your back.
Love that. Anyone else want to add to that? I think we have time for 1 or 2 more words of advice.
Don't mind jumping in. I think just to build on what Sarah said, that collaborative space is so important. So if you are a school leader or a district leader in this space right now, go make space, right? Go find those opportunities so that teachers have the opportunity to frequently and in an ongoing way and in a predictable way have that time together to do that planning. And if you're a teacher in this space, go advocate for it, go ask for it, right? Go find your colleague down the hall or at a school across town who teaches the same course as you and find those moments to be together. I think about one of our math coaches, a shout out to Rosa Aguirre at West Oakland Middle School. She's amazing. Something that always sticks with me is she's like the cool down. That's like the most important thing to think about as we're doing our daily planning. So when she's planning with her teachers, that's the first thing she does. She's like, let's pull up the cool down. Let's do it together. Now let's go back through the lesson, knowing where students need to go, where we want kids to go at the end of the lesson. How are we planning for that throughout the lesson? Where are we going to focus, right? So even if the teacher notes they spend 10 minutes on activity 2, maybe for us, we need to spend 15 minutes, right? I saw in the Q&A box that someone said, asked particularly for middle school, how do we build in time for the math language routines or the synthesis moments, the discussion moments? This is how you make sense of it, right? Where do we want kids to go by the end of the lesson? So what are those opportunities? What are the barriers that we anticipate to getting there? And how are we going to make a plan so that we can just eliminate that barrier during the lesson? Does that need to be some sentence frames? Does it need to be a turn and talk? Does it need to be collect and display so kids can see their language on the board and use that for the rest of the lesson? So those are some things that I really think about, and want to make sure that I'm always supporting teachers to have that space, have that time together to do that work.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I have one last call. Really quickly, if there's another piece of advice that someone wants to jump in and say before we close this out.
I just want to say something really quick because we haven't brought it up yet. And that is take the time to build classroom community. Take the time, build it into everything you do because kids can't talk if they don't know each other. So if you think that, I've heard Sherelle say, go slow to go fast. This is one of those things. Take the time to do that. You don't have to stop teaching math content to do that. You can embed it. We do that in our K-5 curriculum in the first 5 days. That's probably not enough. So you're already doing great things to do that. Don't give that up when you adopt IM. Keep doing those great things to build community.
So important. Thank you. I'm so glad I opened up the space for one more comment because we needed to hear that. I am so Grateful for this discussion today. So much brilliance coming from my colleagues at IM. I'm sure that this webinar is going to be playing on repeat at planning sessions, at PLCs throughout the fall. And I just want to thank you. You are amazing. Thank you to our brilliant panel. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us today. And a huge thank you to you, all of our participants. Thank you for attending and trusting us to deliver this content to you. And if you have been paying attention to our webinars, you know what's coming next. It is a quote from a poet that my mother introduced to me when I was a little girl, Dr. Maya Angelou. May she rest in peace. The quote for today is, "You can't use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have." And this quote reminds me of the art of teaching. No matter how awesome and high quality your instructional materials are, and they are indeed awesome, gotta say that, it is the teacher who is crafting the instructional experience for each and every unique and whole individual in their classroom. Given the number of decisions teachers make from minute to minute to respond to student thinking, to ensure that students' voices are heard and their brilliance is validated, to make sure each student feels a sense of belonging and feels confident enough to persevere through complex mathematical problems and then share their developing thinking, all while maintaining pacing and adhering to the rigor of the grade level standards. I mean, that takes a lot of skill, a lot of expertise, a lot of creativity. Now imagine the possibilities when teachers are given the time to create together. As my colleagues just said, collaborate in planning sessions or PLCs. The more creativity we use, the more we have. As we showed in our last webinar, the disparities in achievement data hasn't changed in decades. We have to do things differently if we want different outcomes. And together we have the power to shift the narrative about our students' math education. So let's use our creativity. And this is the 5th webinar of the IM Experience Presents webinar series. Webinar 6 is going to be called Inspiring Collective Agency Through Responsive Coaching. It'll be held on September 14th, and it'll feature teachers and leaders from New Orleans, Louisiana, who you may have come to know through our case study. They'll share how their responsive coaching model has led to successful implementation of the IM curriculum at Homer Plessy Community Schools. So make sure you join us for that. To join our mailing list, you can stay up to date, go to illustrativemathematics.org, and you can click on IM Experience. You can see all of the things that we're doing. The IM Experience connects educators to webinars, podcasts, our roadshow, where our first stop was Des Moines, Iowa. Shout out to the Iowans here and joining us today. Conferences and events, case studies, and other engaging and interactive resources. Follow our new landing page as we expand upon these experiences and build our bank of informative resources. Our goal is to deliver quality experiences to our IM community that inspire, uplift, and encourage all learners to know, use, and enjoy mathematics. As part of our IM experience, we have developed case studies of 3 very distinct IM districts in Greeley, Colorado, Des Moines, Iowa, and New Orleans, Louisiana, that tell unique stories of implementation. You can now access these case studies through our landing page. I am at illustrativemathematics.org/IM-experience and have concrete examples of the IM classroom. And if you haven't already visited our website, or if you haven't visited in a while, you may have missed a plethora of new free resources and ways to connect with us. You can download our free ebooks, view our on-demand webinars, access our certified blog, and get free teaching resources, or schedule a call with our passionate and knowledgeable client services team. All right. And just to make sure that we are getting the most and you are getting the most from your experiences. If you still have questions and you would like to get them answered, please complete our survey. We'd love to hear your feedback. So our cool down today, we have a survey. Tell us what you want to learn on future webinars. We'll drop that link in the chat for you if you are not able to screen grab right now. Just give you a second to grab it. And special thanks to our exclusive providers of IM K-12 Math, our IM certified partners, Kendall Hunt, McGraw-Hill, and Imagine Learning. We are dropping their links into the chat for you to connect with them directly. Thank you to our senior leadership team, Brandy, Cam, Gail, Liz, Carl, Chris, Kristen, and Bill, who continuously lead our organization to achieve its mission. And thank you to our technical producer and marketing coordinator, Elizabeth Sneed, partner and client support team, Catherine, Patty, and Ray, for facilitating the Q&A and chat, and our fabulous marketing team, Carrie, Goodness, Raina, Kimmy, Brandy, for your hard work in making this event a reality. And last, but certainly not least, thank you to our IM community for joining us for this webinar today and every day as we work towards affirming all students as mathers and engaging them in rigorous grade level mathematics instruction. And again, don't forget to follow us on social media and add the hashtags IMXwebinar and learn with IM when you share your thoughts on Twitter, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Thank you all.